Hello again. In the second clip, we will talk about the economics of renewable energy sources. Becoming a 100% green economy clearly is a very ambitious project, but is it also feasible? Well, many studies show that the technical potential of renewable energy sources is substantially higher than global energy demand, and so in theory, it should not limit the increased use of renewables. But what is much more relevant is a subset of this technical potential, which is the economic potential. And here we also take into account the actual cost of different generation technologies, assumptions about technology learning, and associated social costs and benefits. And so the economic potential will also depend on policy objectives like climate change mitigation, of course, but also energy security, or the creation of green jobs. The most widely used metric for comparing the competitiveness of different generation technologies is the levelized cost of electricity. This is the price per megawatt hour at which electricity must be generated from a specific source in order to break even over the lifetime of the project. According to this metric, onshore wind, for instance, seems to be very competitive compared to most other baseload alternatives. But the levelized cost is not the best suited metric because it treats all electricity generated as a homogeneous product, not taking into account that the value of electricity can actually vary substantially. So it makes a difference if you sell electricity during the peak hours at day, or if in contrast wind energy enters the system during the low demand night hours when wholesale prices are very low or even negative. And so the levelized cost of electricity of two technologies could be the same, while at the same time these two technologies might have very different net economic values and expected profitability. During the last years, substantial expected but also unexpected cost decreases could be achieved for different renewable technologies. These were related, of course, to the ongoing R&D activities, to technological developments and learning, but they also were related to the low-cost manufacturing of solar modules and wind turbines in China. So the cost for wind energy decreased by about 50% since 1990, and the cost for solar PV even by more than 80% over the same period. The average selling price of solar PV modules decreased by 20% for each doubling in volume. Even though substantial cost decreases could be achieved for different renewable generation technologies, public support to development and deployment still plays a very important role. And here it's the member states who decide which technologies to support and how. And this has actually led to a patchwork of very diverse national support schemes, also often connected to rules for priority connection and priority dispatch. We have price-based instruments, including mainly different forms of feed-in tariffs, feed-in premiums, and fiscal incentives. And we also have quantity-based instruments like tradable green certificates and quota obligations. Renewable support does also differ in terms of the level of support, as you can see nicely in this table, which shows the weighted average support level for selected technologies in a number of member states. And so in 2011, the average support for biomass, for instance, varied between 49 and 144 euros per megawatt hour. For wind energy, it varied between 22 and 95 euros. And what you also can see is that the average support level varies strongly among the different generation technologies. So solar PV still gets the by far highest subsidies. Given these very different national support schemes, renewable production does not necessarily happen there where you find the best natural conditions, but actually where investors find the best commercial conditions. And we will talk about the different support instruments in place, their effectiveness, but also their efficiency and the need to adapt them in the second module of this training course. Let me conclude. We know that the technical potential of renewable energy sources does not limit their increased deployment, but the economic potential, which is actually a subset of this technical potential, is restricted by the economics of different generation technologies. We also saw that substantial cost decreases could be achieved, but nevertheless, renewables still rely to a large extent on public support for R&D, but also for their deployment. So the key challenge now is how to align renewable generation with market signals, while at the same time still giving the right incentives to investors. And I think this was okay.